Hello friends, Frogopolis here, and today I would like to talk about the Nicolas Cage movie Dream Scenario. Being a fairly new movie, I will be getting into spoiler territory, so if you want to watch it for yourself, I do recommend it. I think it's a great film, but if you've already seen it or just want to hear me talk about it for fun, that would be lovely. So let's get into it. Directed by Kristoffer Borgli, whose name I have hopefully pronounced correctly, Dream Scenario has the surprisingly relatable plot of Nicolas Cage showing up in your dreams. Though in this case his name is Paul Matthews and is this here regular everyman who works as a professor in evolutionary biology. Paul's in the middle of a midlife crisis though. As you can see, he's very self-conscious and feels inadequate despite his achievements. He's still in a seemingly loving relationship, but you can tell they're simply on different wavelengths at this point in their lives. Life changes for Paul though when he becomes increasingly aware that he's showing up in other people's dreams as a passive observer. You see this at the beginning of the movie when him and his daughter are just hanging out at the front of the house until stuff starts falling from the sky and she starts floating up into the air while he is oblivious to everything that's happening. When one of his ex-girlfriends runs into him after a play, she also mentions that he's been in her dreams, but in a non-romantic or sexual sense, and that's pretty awkward. Then his students start talking to him about how he's showing up in their dreams. Though notably, one of the only people who is not experiencing this phenomena is his own wife. Overnight, whether Paul likes it or not, he becomes somewhat of a celebrity because he just keeps showing up in people's dreams. And when he starts asking people, like, what's happening? Why do I keep showing up? What am I doing? The answer is he's just a passive observer. He's just kind of there. At least to me, the idea of suddenly being known by everybody despite them not knowing who you really are as a person is this bizarre nightmare scenario, and Nicolas Cage sells all of this perfectly. What dreams are and why we have them has always been something that's been super interesting to me, and I like how this movie explores that. How does Paul possibly fit into the framework of all of these people's dreams, and what is his importance? Is he simply an intruder, though not intentional? Why him of all people? Initially, he enjoys the attention despite trying to seem otherwise. He sees this as an opportunity to finally be seen for all his life's work. This phenomenon and attention grows even larger after he goes onto the news to talk about it. Doing this seems like a pretty terrible idea, but Paul's ego and curiosity gets in the way. And of course, this backfires, and somebody breaks into his house and tries to kill him. While he's not doing anything in these dreams, I can imagine the stress someone might feel seeing the same person over and over again without any rhyme or reason. Though of course not everyone sees it this way, as he's called in by an advertising agency to see if they can use this new phenomenon to their advantage. Paul doesn't want to be a walking billboard though. At the end of the day, he just wants his work to be recognized. His desire to be recognized goes hand in hand with his insecurity. A prime example of this is how he can't let go of the fact that one of his old colleagues is publishing a paper on a similar subject that he's very interested in, which is ants and the hive mind. Him seeing this as a slight is especially egregious when you realize they haven't really talked in 30 years. In his mind, all of his former colleagues have gone on to do amazing things while he's still stuck in limbo. This is what fuels his decision making throughout the whole film. Even after the guy breaks into their house, he still wants to continue because he's sure everything will be fine and it's a one-off incident. It's not until another incident happens that things start to get even worse. While at the advertising agency, he meets someone there called Molly who wants to learn more about him because she's trying to get him to go off this deal. But there's more to it than that. She's fascinated by him, and when they're in a less professional setting, she admits that him showing up in her dreams goes a little differently than others. Things get more uncomfortable when she wants to reenact this dream in person with him, and both being very drunk at this point, decide to go back to her place and reenact it for research purposes, you know? The contrast between the reality of what's happening and her fantasy she had about him is incredibly funny and uncomfortable. This movie does a great job at mixing horror and comedy, and this scene is just a perfect example of all of it. Both actors did a fantastic job. Credit to Paul, even though he's super drunk at this point, he does reiterate that he's a married man and stops himself from doing something he would regret. This is an important point in the film because earlier on we can already see that stuff is drifting apart between him and his wife, and this shows that deep down, despite all of his worries and insecurities, that he still loves her. Well, the evening doesn't go without incident entirely, since he gets nervous and farts, and then farts again. And then, how can I say this for YouTube? Celebrates prematurely. After this encounter, we learn that his appearances in people's dreams become far, far more sinister. And worst yet, we see this affecting his own family, as his own daughter has a nightmare about him. This further and very negatively affects his relationship with his family and everyone around him. We see that his students have now been traumatized by whatever this dream version of him has done, and while we do get a couple of examples of what he may be doing in these nightmares, it's mostly left up to our imagination. Even Paul himself isn't safe from these nightmares, as he has one where he's hunted down and killed by himself. Now this dream scenario has become a nightmare scenario. Please clap. Being the mental image for people's nightmares and trauma and having absolutely nothing you can do about it is just beyond horrifying. After this, any future prospects he had dry up. Except for Paris. Apparently Paris loves him after this new development, and that's where his book deal happens. Not saying anything about Paris, it's the movie. Because of this unfortunate turn of events, he can't really stay with his family, as he's just become this social pariah. Throughout the movie, we see how his sudden rise to fame has affected his family, with his wife being seen differently and almost kind of negatively because of how people perceive her husband, and his two kids now have to deal with the fact that their father is essentially Freddy Kreuger to their classmates. Things get only worse for him when he decides to go to his daughter's school play even though he's been barred from visiting her. In his struggle to see his daughter, he accidentally hurts one of the teachers, and this causes him to be attacked by the other parents there. And after this, he just kind of stops showing up in people's dreams with no explanation. About a year later, after this has all been said and done, we see that some of his former students have used this experience to make their own dream technology called the Norio, a wristband apparatus that lets you project yourself into other people's dreams, but don't worry, this time it's all going to be ethical. Leave it to capitalism to take an already terrifying idea and make it worse somehow. Paul did get his book deal, but it's clear his relationship with his family is taking a toll after all this. The book didn't even end up the way he wanted it to. People were in love with the idea of him and not the person himself, so the book that came out reflects that. In the end, we get this very bittersweet ending where, alone and miserable, Paul uses this new technology that he helps create to see his wife. A bit earlier in the film, Paul and his wife had this very funny and sweet conversation of what it would be like if he started showing up in her dreams, and it boiled down to him showing up in one of his old Halloween costumes to save her. And of course he'd have a massive schlong. So we get to see that minus the schlong at the end of the film, and god, it's just so heartbreaking. Dream Scenario is a movie that is equal parts scary, funny, and intriguing. And they all come together to make this great character study and really shows how we relate to the people around us. Needless to say, I highly recommend it. Thank you for watching, and remember, if somebody shows up in your dreams and tries to sell you something, kill them with the unicorn you're riding on.